Let me be abundantly clear. There is not a scenario where the SEC champion is not in the college football playoff. There is not a scenario where there are 4 teams that are sent to the 2 bowl sites to decide who will play for the national championship that does not include an SEC member. It is not going to happen. It's fun to talk about on social media. It's fun to talk about on sports radio, sports television. We can dream up all the scenarios we'd like. You can think up every possible outcome. And if it doesn't include a member from the Southeastern Conference in the Final Four, it ain't happening. That's all there is to it. And it is fun to dream up those scenarios, believe me, because it spurns the discussions that we all kind of would like to have, but we don't ever really get to have. The reality is either Georgia or Alabama are going to be in the college football playoff, one way or another. It's going to happen. And we can talk about the potential scenarios, but it's a waste of time. When you look at this week's college football playoff rankings, don't really have a whole lot of qualms with them. I understand that Ohio State was ranked number 1 the first 2 weeks. I saw a tweet from Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com that said only 4 times since 2014, when the college football playoff was launched, has the number 1 team dropped after a loss. And 3 of those times have been Ohio State. I find that interesting, but I also know that they were ranked number 1 the first 2 weeks because they had the best resume. Now you can argue that Georgia has a similar comparable resume, coupled with the fact that outside of 2023, they are the back-to-back national championship winners and have won 27 games in a row. Is that supposed to matter? No. But guess what? It does. It does matter. So I don't really have a whole lot of qualms with that. I do. You know what my qualm is, though? Is that it certainly appears as if the committee believes that the Pac-12 from top to bottom is the best conference because Washington, Oregon, Oregon State, Arizona, and Utah are all in the top 25. There are 5 teams there in the top 25, which is comparable to the SEC of Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee in the top 25. So at minimum, they might not think that the Pac-12 is the best conference in America, but they think it's the second best conference in America. And the undefeated team of the second best conference in America is at number 5, when it certainly appears as if they believe that the ACC is not very good. So I have some trouble rectifying that. Like I have some trouble pondering, like, wait, what do you think that the best team in the second best conference is the 5th best team in America? And I wonder where that eye test / resume that we've talked about the last couple of weeks comes into play there, of like, okay, when, like, is the top 4 based on resume and then 5 through 25 is eye test, and that's why Washington hasn't been lifted into the top 5 yet, into the top 4 yet? I don't know. But I do struggle with that, of like, okay, you think that the Pac-12 is really good, but not good enough that its undefeated leader is one of the 4 best teams in the country. Got it. And I don't think it's outrageous to say that they're not, like, the committee isn't pitting Ohio State, Michigan together as a, you know, like, winner makes the playoff, loser goes home. I don't think that's the feeling. But when you look at teams 1 through 8, and I've consistently said Alabama being at number 8 is where the cutoff is right now. Alabama is the last school that has a path to the college football playoff. Missouri, God bless you, at number 9, don't got a shot. Louisville, Oregon State, Penn State, it's over. You don't have a chance. Alabama, Texas, Oregon, Washington, Florida State, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia. Those are the 8 schools that can be the Final Four. But you see a lot of discussion on social media, sports radio, sports television of, okay, so this scenario plays out, right? 13-0 Michigan, 13-0 Florida State, 13-0 Washington, 12-1 Oregon, 12-1 Texas, 12-1 Alabama, 12-1 Georgia. Who goes to the college football playoff? Because the immediate reaction is it's Texas, right? Or it's Oregon. It ain't. It's Alabama or it's Georgia. It's that simple. If the committee believes that the SEC is the best team in America, and they've got 6 teams ranked in the top 25, which would lead you to believe that's the way they feel, they're not going to leave the one-loss champion of that conference out of the college football playoff. And I'm here to tell you, if it's Alabama that is the champion and they've beaten Georgia, well, guess what? You just beat the number 1 team in America. So you beat the number 1 team in America. Your loss is to the, at this point, in this scenario, probably the number 5 or 6 Texas Longhorns. Guess what? You're going to the college football playoff despite having lost to Texas. Or they say Georgia drops from number 1 to number 4, and guess what? Georgia's going to the college football playoff. Like the idea that the SEC champ, because they have 1 loss, is not going to make the playoff. Sorry, it is not going to happen. 100%. It is not going to be an option because it's going to be an easy decision. Either the back-to-back national champions who lost their first game in 2 calendar years is going to slide in at the last spot, or the team who is ranked 8th right now will have the best win in America and conceivably the best loss in America. And they're going. So while it would be fun to have the conversation and have that actually play out, where on that Sunday we are sitting here bitching back and forth about who deserves what's fair, what's unfair, biases and misperceptions and all of those things. When push comes to shove, there will be 4 teams that have the opportunity to win the national championship. And I am here to tell you that one of them will be from the Southeastern Conference. Like it, hate it, think it's fair, unfair, warranted or not, it does not matter. Either Georgia or Alabama will be in the Final Four. And we can dream up, even if it comes down to they both lose one. I guess maybe the only way it doesn't happen is if Georgia loses before the SEC championship game and then loses to Alabama and has 2 losses. But Alabama would have also needed to lost to either Auburn or, lose their, lose to, they would have to lose to UT Chattanooga. So that's like Georgia has to lose to Georgia Tech or Tennessee and then lose to Alabama, and Alabama has to lose to UT Chattanooga or Auburn and then beat Georgia. That is the one scenario. If your scenario is everything stays chalk until the SEC championship game and then Alabama beats Georgia, Alabama's going to the college football playoff despite having lost to Texas. And if Texas wins the Big 12 and they're 12-1, sorry, but should have beat Oklahoma, huh? Like that's going to be the SEC champion is getting in, barring having 2 losses. And even then, if Alabama beats Georgia after losing to UT Chattanooga or Auburn, I think Georgia still gets in over Texas. Georgia still gets in over Oregon. Unless there are 4 13-0 conference champions. And it's in this scenario, like Ohio State and Michigan, one of them is going to have a loss. One of these 4 schools that are currently in the top 4 is going to have a loss. So the idea that you can't have 4 undefeated conference champions. You can have 4 teams or 3 teams with 1 loss apiece battling for spot number 4, conceivably, with the idea that, and I'm here to tell you that whoever loses Ohio State, Michigan has the best loss or the not worst loss in America. So they're not going to be damaged all that much for it. And will tell you, I will die on the hill of like whoever loses that game doesn't really have a gripe of like what else you did throughout the rest of the season. You got an opportunity to prove you're one of the 4 best teams in the country by beating one of the 4 best teams in the country. If you didn't take it, that's on you, brother. But I'm here to tell you that whoever loses, if they were to play this Saturday, it would be number 2 versus number 3. Whoever loses that game has the best loss. So you're not going to drop all that far. You're not going to drop from, if Ohio State's number 2 and they lose to Michigan, they're not going to drop to number 9. They're going to drop to number 5. If Michigan loses to Ohio State, they're not dropping to 8. They're dropping to 5. And they're on the outside looking in and waiting and hoping that Florida State and Georgia both lose, or Washington loses to Oregon, whatever the case may be. We can sit here and dream up all sorts of scenarios. There is a scenario where I think there's like a 4-way tie in Nebraska ends up being the winner of the Big Ten West. It's not really going like we can talk about those scenarios. It's the same thing at the NFL playoffs every year. It's like, okay, well, if this team ties and then this team goes to kick a game-winning field goal and the ball is intercepted by a Falcon and carried back into the end zone and they drop it and the other team falls on it in the end zone for a touchdown. We can dream that up. We can talk about that. But we can also live in the real world and say, okay, this is probably not going to happen. And if these things do happen, what does history tell us the precedent is? Well, since 2014, you know who's been in the college football playoff every year? The SEC. And when you have 2 of the top 8 teams in the country right now from that conference, and conceivably number 2 still waiting to play number 3, and number 5 waiting to play number 6 again, the chances of those 2 schools, neither one of them being in the top 4, are astronomically small. So we can continue to have those discussions, and believe me, they're fun. I enjoy them. But you also need to recognize that it's a waste of time, because ain't gonna happen. Will not happen. One of those 2 schools between Georgia and Alabama is going to be in the top 4 on that Sunday in December. Now, when it gets to that Sunday in December, we can have this conversation of whether that's fair, unfair, real, not real, whatever. But until we get there, I think it's important to kind of like temper the expectations and understand that by the time we get there, you need to know that that's what's going to happen. And I think that's important to kind of have that in your back pocket to know, because I think there are some expectations like, this is the year. No, it's not. It's not the year. It's just not. Is there part of me that would love to see that chaos? Of course there is. Of course there is. Do I want to see it? It's just not likely to happen, so I'm not going to get my hopes up. And I hope you don't either. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great content we're pumping out here at Saturday Glory. If you're listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping us get in front of more college football fans. That's always appreciated. Back at it tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle from Saturday Glory.